B.A. O'Connell is an author and artist that seeks to soothe and shock with their words. And they're here with us just now. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing great today. So, first of all, how would you describe the style of the poetry that you write?
Well, I mostly like to write free form poetry. It's really heavy in imagery and it has a really heavy emphasis on musicality and imagery.
Yeah. And what actually is free form poetry? Is it just kind of where there's no rules?
Well, it's kind of like free. It's like, yeah, you kind of make up your own structure for it. It's like free verse or yeah, basically there's no rules. You just make up your own.
Yeah. But then what actually makes it poetry as opposed to just a paragraph of thoughts?
Well, I think the most important thing that separates, a poem from somebody just breaking up a sentence kind of funnily, is the imagery, is the metaphor, is the way you use the structure you make up for your poem.
Yeah, definitely. So I take it you were actually thinking about these things because I always just assumed that all these metaphors and similes are just kind of made up by high school teachers or whatever.
No, I mean they're actually really important to the art form of poetry, and I would argue that they're the most essential part of a poem is
Yeah.
your ability to create a good metaphor.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I think a lot of people would probably, I guess, wrongly assume that the most important part of poetry is rhyming, but most poems you see don't actually rhyme, really. It's only the maybe ones for children or fun ones that
Yeah,
rhyme.
yeah. Rhyme is actually not all that important to a poem. I mean, you
Yeah.
can you can have a rhyming scheme, but if you have a rhyming scheme, it has to have a point.
Yeah.
Just rhyming doesn't necessarily make it a good poem.
No, exactly. I think there's a poet here, like hundreds of years ago, that did a poem about like the Tay Bridge, I think, and it's notoriously like the worst poet ever. And his stuff did rhyme, so it just goes to show that just because you rhyme doesn't mean you're good. Yeah. So who would you say your audience are really? Do you aim your poems at a specific demographic?
I like to reach out to people around my own age as well as like maybe teenagers, young
Yeah.
adults, people who I think are in particular emotionally turbulent times in their life. So people in transitional stages. I think because in that time period, people feel a lot of deep emotion, and I think knowing that they're not alone feeling that emotion, it can help them. I hope.
Yeah, definitely. And with that in mind, I suppose, would you like your poems to perhaps be studied by school students? Because I guess that's the perfect way for them to come across it.
I mean, it would be nice if someday I was studied in schools. I mean, that sounds a little egotistical, I think, but it would
Yeah.
be nice. It would be nice if I was studied someday.
Yeah. And do you find that this demographic actually are interested in your poems? Because I guess poetry is something that, I don't know, I don't really know anyone that's interested in it, to be honest. And if somebody said they like reading poems, you'd maybe keep your distance from them. I don't know.
I mean, I think you have to find the right kind of people.
Yeah.
I find that people online are particularly interested in the poems. They find some kind of value in them.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose with the internet, you can find anyone who likes the poems from any age, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And although you're targeting that demographic, do you find that that's who enjoy them most, or is it broader?
I think mostly people, young adults and teenagers are mostly interested, but I do
Yeah.
find that I do have some older readers who find them, worthwhile and
Yeah.
a good read.
Yeah, definitely. And do you have particular themes that you like to write about in the poems as well?
Yeah, so I like to focus on things like mental illness, the struggle of growing up,
Oh, yeah.
uh, romances, unhealthy relationships, things that I think a lot of people experience when they're young.
Definitely. And I guess that just goes along with that demographic then. And how many poems have you written so far?
Oh goodness, I couldn't even count them. I
Oh,
I've written so many.
yeah.
Not all of them good, but I've written a lot.
Yeah. Does it get to a point where you can't really remember some of the ones? Like if somebody showed it to you, you'd be like, "What? I wrote that."
Oh yeah. I think sometimes I go through like my computer and I find old poems and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
can't believe I wrote that.
Well, do you ever look at it and think, "Oh, that's really good. Whoever wrote that must be amazing," and then you kind of realize it was you?
I mean, yeah, sometimes I'm like, wow, this is really good. Sometimes it's the opposite, though. Sometimes I look at it and I'm like, no.
Yeah. As long as it was a long time ago, and then you can't really feel bad about it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
And although some of them are hard to remember, do you have any favorites of ones you've written so far, or maybe the ones from recently?
Um, well, I think it's hard to pick a favorite, really, because
Yeah.
you're invested in so many of them. You spend so much time crafting them. It's hard to remember if you like this one better or not. I think it changes as you read them.
Yeah. And are each of your poems very similar? How different are they, really?
I go through phases. So, I'll get stuck on an idea for a week or a month, and these poems will all be very similar. And then all of a sudden, the thinking will change and they'll be very different.
Yeah. And how do you actually write a poem then? Do you have certain things that you do to help you get in the mindset?
Yeah, so like I like to write every day in the morning. So I'll get up about 6 or 7 and then I'll write till 8. And I like to put on music in the background. So I put on, independent artist, and I listen to sad music mostly
Right.
and write.
Yeah. And you mentioned that your poems are musical, so I take it that definitely helps with it.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely, yes.
Yeah. And does the mood of the music reflect what you're writing?
Generally, yes.
Yeah. And does your mood on that day affect your writing? I guess it does to a big extent, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Depending on my mood and what I've been thinking about the day before or when I woke up that morning, it can make a huge difference.
Yeah, definitely. And where do you write as well?
I like to write at the local university in Plainview. I like to write there. I think it's interesting. You can get a lot of inspiration from people watching, just thinking about what's going through other people's heads.
Yeah, that's interesting. I always like to do that, like at the airport, try and guess where people are going. Like, he's going to Amsterdam and all this kind of stuff. People watching is so fun, and you can get a lot of inspiration from it, really. And all the weird people you see out and about. And it's interesting doing it at a university rather than your own house. Do you feel like a bit of an imposter? Because I guess universities are actually pretty open, more than you'd expect, right? So you can actually go there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they check if you're a student when you go there. I mean, it does sometimes feel a little strange when people will ask, a question about a class or something, and you're like, oh, actually, I'm just here.
Yeah, definitely, because you can go in the libraries and all sorts and use it. So how long does it normally take you to write a poem on average?
I would say between 20 to 30 minutes to get the draft down.
Yeah.
And then there's just a long process of deciding if I like what I've done or if it's actually a worthwhile poem, if I can tinker with it.
Yeah, and I guess do you release everything you do? Because you can't release everything. There's probably not enough space on the internet. And also, you might not be as proud of one poem as you are another.
No, I'm definitely very picky about which poems I ultimately put in collections or online. I don't release everything, because honestly, if you're creating as much product as I am, I mean, not all of them are going to be worthwhile.
Yeah. And is it just your opinion on what you release? Because I think sometimes you might find that you might not like one you've done, but somebody else might come along and go, oh, that one's really good.
Well, actually, the thing is, as much as I want people to read my poetry, I'm terrible at allowing people to read it, while I'm there, or if they know who I am, I just maybe not.
Yeah, I guess it's bad enough at school when you had to write a poem or something and you know that somebody was going to read it and mark it, and you just wait for the teacher to look at yours and you see them look puzzled, and that's the worst look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the criticism. I can't handle it from people I know.
Yeah, definitely. And do you do any research before you write? Because I guess if you're writing about specific topics that you might not know about, it helps.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do a lot of not intentional research, but because so much of my poetry is written based on what I'm interested in or what I'm doing at the moment. A lot of times I'll get interested in some kind of part of history or some kind of writer or something, and they'll end up in my poetry, and I'll just have these facts because I've been looking them up anyway.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go back to the very beginning. Where were you born exactly?
I was born in Denver, Colorado.
Ah,
Yeah, yeah.
and what was it like there? Was it fun?
Well, I actually moved to Texas when I was about 2, so I don't remember much of Denver.
No.
But Texas has been a wonderful place to grow up. I love Texas. I don't think I'd leave very willingly.
Yeah. So I take it you're there now then?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. And is that fun?
It is fun. It is fun. I live in a small town, so it's pretty quiet.
Yeah.
But we can get to Lubbock, which is where Texas Tech is, and there's some fun things to do there. So I have a good time.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds it. And Texas is a massive place. So whereabouts is that area in terms of north, south, east, or west?
It's north in the Panhandle, so it's in the little square part at the top of the state.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense then. Nice and north. Yeah. Not as hot as the south as well, but I guess it's still pretty hot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty hot here.
Yeah. So what was your childhood and upbringing like in this Texas town?
Well, my childhood was pretty normal until about 15, when I got in trouble with the law, and I ended up going to a state school for 4 years, and that was different. It was interesting to say the least.
Yeah. Well, state schools are pretty normal here. I don't know about over there. Is it different?
It's like juvenile detention. It's like kiddie prison.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. 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 We just use that to mean a government-owned normal school. So that's interesting. And what was that experience like, really? Because I take it it's very different to what you get in a normal school.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, it was. We did have classes and things, but mostly it was juvenile detention. I mean, we were there to pay for whatever we'd done against the law and get disciplined. And it wasn't exactly fun. It wasn't exactly like a normal high school experience, but it helped me learn things. I think it made me a more empathetic and understanding person of people who've gone through difficulties. So.
Yeah. So I take it it's just like boarding school, but worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how much of it is education then, and how much is punishment or rehabilitation or whatever?
I mean, I'd say about 20% was spent on education, and the rest was, spent on reforming us into model citizens.
Yeah. That's quite a tough percentage then.
Yeah, yeah.
And was there any play involved? Any fun or?
I mean, yeah. I mean, we had they had a basketball team, and they played other juvenile delinquents, but I mean, they did things to try to make it as normal as they could. I mean, we did bingo and craft things, and they had a basketball team, and we had gym and stuff. I mean, they tried.
Yeah. And do you feel that experience helped you become not a criminal anymore, or could it have made it worse?
It's definitely a strong deterrent. You certainly don't want to go back to a place like that. But I also think it just helps. It helps. At least it helped me. I know it doesn't help everybody, but I think it helped me see that other people, they have their struggles, they have their problems. You can't be angry at the world because everybody's got things going on.
Yeah, definitely. So before all that happened, what were you like as a child?
I was mischievous. I was a bit of a rebel. I liked to do things my own way.
Yeah. Does that reflect in your poetry then? Given that you do free verse, you do things your own way.
Yeah, I think so. I think I still have a strong rebel streak. I definitely like to do things my own way, and I like to think I see the world in my own way. So I think that's definitely very reflected in my poetry.
Yeah. And did you have any favorite books or favorite poems even as a child?
Let's see. As a child, I'm trying to think. What I had some favorite books for sure. I liked
Yeah.
I liked Harry Potter. I was very into Harry
Oh
Potter.
yeah.
Um, I also liked Call of the Wild. Not Call of the Wild.
Mm.
No, White Fang. I liked White Fang.
I don't know if I've heard that one. What's that one?
So White Fang is about Buck's son. So Buck is the dog in Call of the Wild,
Yeah, oh
and
yeah.
White Fang is the half wolf son, and it's his
Oh.
story about actually finding his way back to being a domestic dog from being a half wolf puppy.
Oh, so it's a spin-off then.
Yeah, yeah, spin-off sequel. Yeah,
Yeah, okay. I just saw the Harrison Ford movie of Call of the Wild last year. That's the only way I get the reference.
the book is better than that movie.
Yeah, I thought the movie was pretty boring, to be honest. What subjects did you do at school as well? Because was there a kind of limitation on what you could do at the state school, or was that kind of before you'd get to pick what you want anyway?
I mean, yeah, it was really before I would have decided what I wanted to do anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, I always enjoyed the English class, no
Hmm.
matter where I was at. I mean, the English class was the best class.
And then when you did get to decide what to do, what did you pick?
So when I went to college, I actually went through 3 or 4 different majors, which is funny
Wow.
because uh, but I started with environmental science, which
Oh.
I don't know. I thought I needed a practical career, so I was like science.
Hmm.
And then I went to art,
Oh.
and then I finally settled on just English, and I got my
Yeah.
degree in English.
Yeah. But then poetry is an art, so that second major could still work, but I think
Yeah.
that art is more
Well, they were
painting.
thinking they were thinking more fine arts like sculpture and yeah, painting.
Yeah, definitely. And when you inevitably did your major in English, did you realize then that this was something you wanted to spend all your life doing at 6 in the morning?
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, I think I was my sophomore year, and I took a creative writing class. And
Yeah.
I actually had been writing poetry for a while before this, but then I kind of realized, wow, this
Hmm.
is actually kind of fun. I could do this for a long time, you know?
Yeah. And it's interesting because you'd get a qualification at the end of that, but of course you don't really need a qualification to become a poet because you never have to apply for the job. So,
Right.
did you use that qualification for anything?
So actually, mostly what I used college and grad school for was to make connections.
Yeah.
I now have the knowledge from my professors and the people at Wayland, actually in Plainview where I write, to know how to use the publishing industry and how to promote my books and things like that.
Oh, yeah, of course. How did you get into poetry then? Because you mentioned that you were already writing it by that point. So, what was it that kick-started it?
So I kind of learned that the way to deal with a lot of emotions, rather than being criminal, is to just express them in some way. And so I really got into poetry and using that as a way to vent things and get things out in the open.
Yeah. So, did you write a lot of personal poems then?
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
still do. I mean, I still
Hmm.
write a lot based on my own life.
Yeah. Does the reader know it's your life, or are we just to assume it's a character?
I mean, I would prefer to think of it as a persona, and I would
Yeah.
prefer for people to think of it as a persona because I don't want people to assume when I'm writing this poem that it's, necessarily 100% the truth about me. I
Yeah.
want it to be something universal, something people can use for themselves.
Yeah, and I guess do you just find it's really cathartic to write about your own experiences? And I suppose it's maybe not as good as talking to somebody, but it definitely gets it out there because you're writing it down.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is really cathartic. I think it's a great
Yeah.
way to kind of deal with those emotions and process them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's the same kind of psychology as if you want to make a complaint, you write a really angry letter and then you just scrunch it up. And even though
Yeah.
you haven't really done anything, you feel a lot better.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think it's a great way to say, hey, I have this issue, or I have I have this problem with the way the world is right now, and this is all I can do about it, but at least it's something.
Yeah. So if you were to tell your younger self anything, what advice would you give them?
I think I would tell my younger self. I think I would tell them, don't be afraid of your emotion. Don't be afraid to use it for something good.
Yeah. And as a poet, do you ever struggle with people maybe belittling your work, maybe? Because I think a lot of people maybe poo-poo poetry as just a little bit of silliness and it's not really proper art. So how do you deal with the critics?
Well, I think the first thing I do with the critics is mostly ignore them. But it also is a frustrating place to be, to think, well, so many people don't like poetry, and I feel like they've
Yeah.
never really experienced, a good poem, a poem that speaks to them, and it's kind of a little sad to me, like,
Yeah.
because when you find a poem that really means something to you, I mean, it's really powerful.
Yeah, and the other problem is really that when I was at school, the poems they picked for us to study were terrible. So that just gives everyone an image that poems are terrible. But if they'd picked good ones, then poems would be good.
Yeah, I agree, and I think like plays, most poems are best if you read them out loud, if you
Yeah.
perform them. So I think if we showed people spoken word poetry, or had more readings of poetry instead of just handing them a paper and saying, hey, figure out what this means.
Yeah.
I think if people performed poetry, a lot more people would fall in love with it.
Yeah, and I guess maybe there's the other thing of just make up your own mind what this poem means and interpret it for yourself rather than having somebody do it for you and just have to copy, because that's what we did at school, really.
Oh yeah. I think that's important too. I mean, I think
Yeah.
a good poem has so many possible meanings that it kind of becomes up to the individual what they take away from it. I think that's an important thing we need to teach people too.
Yeah.
Poems don't have just this is what this means.
Yeah. And do you have any favourite poets or poems yourself?
I'm a huge fan of Jack Kerouac and Sylvia Plath. My favorite poem by Sylvia Plath is Lady Lazarus, and my favorite poem by Jack Kerouac. I'm really more into his novels, but he did write a lot of good poetry. He had a lot of good theories about poetry, so I like him a lot too.
Yeah. And are there any poets or poetry styles that you don't like?
I'm really not a fan of what I call Instagram poetry, or
Oh.
poems where they take a really simple idea and then they hammer you over the head with it, where they feel like they have to explain themselves very thoroughly for
Oh.
a very set meaning, and it's very short. I just don't like that. It's you should respect your reader enough to figure out what you're trying to tell them, and B, like, what's the point? What are you doing?
Do you have an example of that? Because I'm just trying to think how that would be.
Well, I mean, this is going to be controversial, but I think Rupi Kaur is actually she wrote the poetry book Milk and Honey, and a couple others, and I really don't like her style. I just feel like she really explains herself too much, and she doesn't put a lot of. I mean, I'm sure she puts a lot of effort into her poems, and I'm sure she's very proud of her work, and congrats to her, and she's been published and all. But I just feel like that style of poetry is not particularly interesting to me, and I don't like it.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess Instagram poetry, it's all just to get likes, so they're gonna make it like that, even if it's not right. I don't really know what I'm saying anymore. So what actually is poetry to you? How would you describe it in your own words?
I think poetry is the art of taking an emotion, an idea, or a story, and turning it into something like something metaphorical, something universal. So say you have the feeling of, oh, I'm angry with this person.
Yeah.
And you take metaphor and you take simile and you take imagery and you turn it into this really beautiful moment and reflection of yourself that other people can also use to reflect about themselves.
That's interesting. When you write poetry, do you find that you're exhausted at the end, or does it actually energize you because of all this stuff coming to you?
I mean, I start my day with it for a reason, because it makes me feel it makes me feel A, like I've done something productive with my day, and B, like,
Yeah.
yeah, really energized. Like, oh yeah, I finally got something out on the page. I can move on to my other mundane task of the day.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. And I guess the thing about doing it so early in the morning is that you've got something done so early and you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the day if you were going to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that's a nice thing is I've accomplished it. I've gotten it done.
Yeah, definitely. And you just have that accomplishment feeling for the rest of the day. Whereas if you left it till the evening, all day you would be thinking about what you're going to write and the day would be kind of wasted in a way because the poetry would become the point of the day.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I would spend all day just thinking, oh, I gotta get that done. I gotta figure out what I'm gonna write about. Yeah, it
Yeah.
would drive me nuts.
Yeah, definitely. Do you set an alarm to wake up at that time or do you naturally wake up with insomnia or something?
No, I mean, I pretty much just wake up around that time every day.
Wow.
I've been doing it so long, it's just a natural habit now.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of people like that. Do you find it easier to wake up at that time during the summer?
I mean, in the summer, I might move it to wake up at 8
Oh,
instead of just 6. But
hmm.
I think it's easier to wake up that early in the winter actually because you're just kind of like, well, it's going to be dark all day anyway. So
Oh, yeah, that's really interesting because I would have thought just like naturally to do with anatomy, your body finds it easier to wake up when it is light.
well, no, I think the reason I sleep in so late in the summer is because frankly, I don't want to get up from my nice air conditioned room to
Oh,
go
yeah.
face the heat.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose that's a problem we don't really have in the UK because we don't really have air conditioning in houses. So we have that problem in the winter of I don't want to get up from my nice warm duvet to go out in the cold. But then if you're
Yeah.
going straight to a nice warm shower, that could be nice. So where do you get your inspiration from then? Is it all sorts of different aspects of your life or maybe stuff that's not your life but internet?
Um, I mean, I think my inspiration comes from a lot of different places. Yeah, parts of it are from, whatever's going on in my life. Sometimes it's stuff going on in my friends' lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, stuff I've read about on the internet, current events. I just get inspiration from all kinds of places.
Yeah. And do you find it easy for the inspiration to come to you? Because if you're writing every day, sometimes you might run out of ideas.
Yeah, I mean there are days where it's like I don't have anything to say today.
Yeah.
I have nothing to write, and on those days I think I just say, you know what, I'll come back to it tomorrow, see what happens.
Yeah, and that's interesting because even though you do that, do you sometimes find that maybe even though you've got inspiration, you might just be sick of writing poems and want to do something else or would
Oh
rather
yeah.
be playing a game, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's plenty of days where I just have to say, you know what, I've written 16 poems this week.
Yeah.
I'm tired. I don't want to write any poems today. I want to watch YouTube or
Yeah.
do something goofy. So I'll just take the break. I'll just say, you know what, if my brain doesn't want it, I don't need to do it.
Yeah. And I guess it's important to do that because if you don't, then it'll just feel like a chore.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to force yourself. I mean, I know a lot of people will say if you're gonna write, you need to write every day. But I think if you try to force yourself, it's just not going to be a good product. You're just not
Yeah,
gonna.
it'll just be rubbish. It's like when you write stuff for school. I just tried to think of the longest way to express something so that you could meet the word count. So it's just the same as that, really, but
Yeah,
you'd be typing
yeah,
absolute nonsense.
absolutely. Yes.
And do you believe in writer's block necessarily?
Oh yeah. I mean, I know I've definitely experienced writer's block.
Yeah.
There's just days where nothing you put on the page is good enough for you, or
Oh,
you
yeah.
just can't think of an idea you are satisfied with. So yeah, I definitely have experienced that.
Yeah. And I take it you just get around that by having a gap day.
Well, you take a break, but eventually you have to get to a point where it's like, well, I gotta write again.
Yeah.
And when you get to that point, you're gonna write a bunch of crap first, and you just
Yeah.
gotta say, I gotta get the crud out of there, and then eventually the good stuff will come
Yeah.
back.
And what's the longest gap you've ever had due to lack of inspiration?
Oh, I would say 2 or 3 months. That was really
Wow.
difficult too. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
hard. I didn't feel like doing it, and
Hmm.
I could not make myself, and it was hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And in that case, what was it that got you back to doing it?
I think I just said, I writing poetry is what I do, and if I'm not writing poetry, then what am I doing?
Yeah.
And I said, I just got to do it. I just got to
Hmm.
sit down and write. And yeah, a lot of the first stuff that came out was real rough, but eventually it came back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting because there's so many things that we have to do in our lives that we just decide one day that we don't want to do anymore, even though we have to. And then eventually we get back to it somehow, and it just happens. I don't know why. Yeah. And your poems have been included in a few journals recently, right? Haven't they?
Yes, yes, they have. I
Yeah.
was in like Homology Lit, the Lavender Review, a few
Mm.
places like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and is that a good feeling then to be able to be featured there? Because I guess it means that someone appreciates what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a good feeling to know. Well, at least somebody read my poetry and appreciated it. I mean, more than
Yeah,
read it, they appreciated it. They wanted it to be a part of something they created, and that's a
yeah,
really nice feeling. Yes.
yeah, definitely. They read it and thought it was good enough.
Yeah.
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 And is this your full-time career, or do you have other things to pay the bills, or just not make money from poetry?
I am a full-time poet. I wouldn't
Ooh.
say it's a luxurious career, but
No.
it's definitely what I've dedicated myself to full time,
Hmm.
and I enjoy it
Yeah.
tremendously.
And is it comfortable money, or is it more to do with the fun than the money you do it for?
It's more for the fun. It's
Yeah.
definitely a starving artist kind of
Yeah.
lifestyle, but I mean, I do it for the passion of the poetry. I do it because I love poetry.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's good to get to a stage in your life where you can do something that you like as your full time thing.
Oh, definitely, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. And if you weren't doing poetry as your full time career, if we call it that, what would you be doing, do you think? Would it be the art or the environmental science?
I think if I hadn't decided to pursue poetry, no, poetry writing full time, I think I'd want to be a college professor. I think I'd want to
Oh.
be somebody who taught poetry or
Ah.
taught creative writing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to accept that as an answer. That's a bit cheeky because it's basically still poetry you're doing, isn't it?
Well, if I wasn't doing anything related to poetry or English in any way, I think I would be a dream job. I think
Oh,
I would be, I don't know, maybe an artist. Yeah,
yeah.
an artist. I think I'd do that.
Yeah, that sounds fun. And that takes a lot of time, I suppose, doesn't it, art? But I guess poetry does as well, so not much of a change there.
Yeah, not really. Just
Yeah.
a different type of project.
And how would you compare them to? Do you think that poetry is equally as artful as art with a capital A?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I think poetry is definitely, I like to call it painting with words. I think
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
you're trying to put a picture in people's minds, and
Mm.
it's instead of with paints, you're just using images and metaphors.
Oh, yeah. Although they say a picture paints 1,000 words, so you're going to have to write an 1,000 word poem to match it.
Not if you write a good poem. You
Yeah.
can get a very succinct poem done with a
Yeah.
great image if you're good at it.
Yeah, I don't know if many people have the time for an 1,000 word poem, but one
No.
exists probably.
Oh, probably. I mean, people have written epic poems, but
Yeah.
they've fallen out of favor.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And because your poems are quite musical, have you ever thought about writing the lyrics to a song?
I mean, I have. I mean, I love music. I
Yeah,
love it tremendously, but I have no musical talent of my own.
yeah.
Um, I can't play an instrument. I can't sing.
Hmm.
So I would love to write lyrics for somebody someday. That would be
Yeah,
great. It would be absolutely fantastic. But
yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever have that opportunity.
Because I guess to write the lyrics, you probably don't really need any musical talent because you're just doing the lyrics. And as
Yeah,
long as you
yeah.
know the structure of a song, maybe, then that should be all right. Or somebody could
I mean,
write the
yeah,
tune first and then you'd know what you're doing,
yeah.
I guess.
I mean, yeah. If somebody wrote me a tune and they were like, "We'll put lyrics to this," I probably could do it.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, the lyrics are very similar, probably, because it's all about a specific theme, isn't it?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of crossover between good lyrical writing and good poetry writing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of great poets today are actually, songwriters.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that's the thing. Trying to think. There are some songwriters that if you Google them, it'd be like, Bob Dylan is a singer, songwriter, poet, etc. kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah, I mean Bob Dylan did win the Nobel Prize for poetry,
Oh,
so yeah, he
yeah.
definitely counts. So
Oh, yeah. So what else do you like to get up to in your spare time when you're not writing poems?
I like to do things like, well, I like to do art. I like to
Yeah.
do drawing and painting, but I also
Wow.
like to do things like language learning and
Mm.
just general study of things.
Yeah. And what languages are you learning?
I'm trying to learn Gaelic and I'm trying to
Oh,
learn Japanese. Now, I
yeah.
won't say I'm very good at either of them yet,
No.
but I am
Yeah.
trying very hard.
Are you good enough to try a Gaelic or Japanese poem yet?
Uh, I would not go there yet. No, I would not go there yet.
Yeah, that's a bit tricky, I suppose. And I suppose you'd have to try like Japanese sayings, which might not make sense when translated into English and vice
Yeah,
versa.
I mean, it's definitely hard to think of metaphor in a different language because the language comes with the culture, and what
Mm,
makes sense in your culture may not make any sense in theirs, or vice
yeah,
versa. Yeah.
that's true. Is it Japanese that have like haiku, or is that somewhere else? Because that's the kind of poetry, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, Japanese have the haiku,
Yeah.
and I'm actually a big fan of Japanese haiku. I have collections all over
Oh,
my house of,
yeah.
of Japanese poets, but that would be fun to write a haiku in Japanese. I think that would be a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
And is that why you're learning Japanese then? Because you're a big fan of that?
Well, I mean, I in general, I'm a big fan of just learning about other cultures, but
Mm.
I actually got interested in Japan when I was a kid. I mean, like
Oh.
every teenage United States kid of my age, I was into like Pokemon and stuff. And I
Oh,
thought, oh,
yeah.
Japan, that's cool. So I've developed a more respectful interest in them since. But yeah, I just find Japanese art and poetry very interesting. So
And did you enjoy the Olympics this year then?
I didn't watch too much of it actually, just because I'm not a sports fan.
All
So
right. Yeah. You could have watched the opening ceremony. That's not very sporty, is it? I don't know.
no.
Watch all the bits when they're in the studio and then turn it off during the actual sport. So, what are some of the examples of poems that you've written recently and, of course, many years ago?
Well, I actually have a few collections now online I've published in the last year or two. I've got I Am Bleeding, I Am Blood, and Broken, Pretty, Shattered Things. They're on Amazon right now, and
Yeah.
they're probably my most mature works because they were put together so recently.
Oh, yeah.
But they're probably the best examples of my quality and my type of work.
Yeah, definitely. And do you find that over the years you've just got better at your craft?
Yeah, I mean, it's like any skill. The longer you work at it, the better you're gonna be.
Yeah. And it's all very well and good, us sitting here talking about your poems, but I hate to put you on the spot, but do you have any on you that you could read out just so people know what you're actually like?
I can get one. Let me see.
Right.
Okay, so this is from February 23rd this year, and it was the
Great.
fourth poem I wrote that day. And
Wow.
it says, I want to know you, like you obviously know me. I want your ways to be my ways. Move me, take my hands and move us together. I see your face when I look in the mirror. I want to be you, to sink, to exist in the same physical space as you, to breathe as you, to know the end as you do.
Wow. It's incredible. Congratulations.
You.
Yeah. And how long did that one take you then? If that was the fourth of the day, presumably it was less than 6 hours.
It was so probably writing the actual poem. Like I said, putting a draft down takes 20 to 30 minutes. So it probably took me
Yeah.
about 20 to 30 minutes to get the draft down. And then I usually let them sit for a week or two, and then I go through and see if there's anything I need to fix. And I don't know, editing can take an hour or two, so
Yeah.
probably an hour and a half plus the 2 weeks of waiting time.
Oh, yeah. That's fun. And do you type them up when you're writing them in the morning, or do you kind of write them down first?
Usually I have a notebook with me. I like
Yeah.
the feel of pencil on paper, and so I will write them in pencil, and then I will come back and type them up at the end of the week.
Uh-huh. And have you ever dreamt a poem? Is that a thing?
Yes, I have. I have. I don't know if I've dreamt a poem, but I have woken up in the middle of the night and been like, "Oh my god," and then written that down. So,
Oh, yeah, that's a bit interesting. Did you keep a notepad by the bed or a voice recorder?
I mean, I do have several notebooks in my room. Yes, and I
Uh-huh.
just write them down when they come to me.
Yeah,
I've written
definitely.
them on the back of envelopes before. And they just come so suddenly.
Yeah. And what can we expect from your most recent poems then in terms of their content?
So in the case of Pretty Broken Shattered Things, that deals with a particularly strange and tumultuous relationship I had when I was younger.
Hmm.
And so that deals a lot with unhealthy obsessions and romantic problems. And then I Am Bleeding, I Am Blood has a lot to do with being queer and questioning your religion
Yeah.
and just the general angst of figuring out who you are.
Yeah, and I like the covers for these as well because the I Am Bleeding, I Am Blood is literally got blood there, but it's kind of like a cool way. It's like painted or something, and it maybe looks a bit like the end of a dress, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of wanted it to look like, like ink and water, maybe,
Yeah.
so kind of the idea of the poetry as the blood, as the ink that
Oh, yeah.
comes from the pain.
Oh, that's deep. I guess it's just like poetry. It's up to your own interpretation about what the
Oh yeah,
covers are.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
And this other picture here, it's got somebody with their head in their hands, it seems.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The despair.
Yeah. Is this person's emotion what happens in the poems a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of sadness and despair in the poetry in there, but I think
Yeah.
there's also a bit of hope and a bit of self-reflection. That's like, yeah, this happened, but it's also I've got to keep moving forward.
Yeah. So, what other stuff have you got coming up in the not too distant future? More poems, etc.
I'm working on some more poems. I'm hoping to
Ooh.
put into a collection, get published as a chapbook somewhere,
Hmm.
and I've also got some fiction ideas I'm working on.
Oh.
Um, I've written a short novella. It's called The Nightmares.
Yeah.
That first one is up, and I'm working on part two in the series right now. So
Yeah. That's exciting. So, you're branching out into books and stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, what can you tell us about these books? Is it all top secret?
It's not all top secret. So in the
Yeah.
case of The Nightmares, so The Nightmares starts with Joe and Sam, who are best friends in high school. It's set in 2016, so
Hmm.
they're typical, mid-aughts teenagers,
Yeah.
and their friend, or well, Joe's friend, is acting strangely and involved in something shady, maybe aliens, maybe something else, and
Ooh.
they're investigating it. And the book two picks up in the consequences of having found out what this friend's secret is and what they're going to do about it.
Oh, that sounds thrilling. I can't wait for that. Yeah. And just something I've quickly read, which I can't believe I didn't notice before, but you actually nearly died 3 times in the same week once.
Yes. So on a trip to Costa Rica, I went with my friends while I was studying Spanish for my undergrad,
Ah.
and so I don't like the ocean. I never liked
Yeah.
the ocean, but they dragged me in. I don't know, just because they were gonna get me over my fear. I don't know.
That didn't
And so
work.
no, it didn't work. So they were teaching me how to jump with the waves and everything, and I
Yeah.
misjumped. I jumped too soon, and the wave came, and I panicked, and I ran
Oh,
back to the beach, and I nearly drowned in the waves. That was bad enough.
yeah.
And then we were hiking, we were hiking to a bar to interview some locals for an assignment, and
Oh,
I nearly got heat exhaustion and
wow.
passed out and died. And then
God.
the last couple of nights we were there, we snuck into the resort pool, and it was just us. And I went down the big slide. I was a little drunk and I went down the big slide and the pool didn't have the lights on, so I couldn't figure out where the top was from the bottom, and I nearly
Oh.
drowned in there too. So
Oh wow. Yeah, that can happen in water, can't it? You don't really know which way is up.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's like space. And how have these near-death experiences influenced your poetry to bring it back round? Because maybe you appreciate life more.
I mean, yeah, it certainly teaches you to be more careful,
Yeah.
not to jump into things.
Yeah.
But honestly, there's a lot of metaphors about water and the
Mm.
ocean in my poetry now. I think it's become a really powerful image of what it can mean to be careless with your life. So
Yeah, definitely. How's this last year been for you in lockdown? Because we haven't even mentioned that yet. Have you been enjoying the time to write poetry, or have you just not liked being stuck at home in general?
it's been fun. It was fun for like the first month, maybe. It was like, oh yeah, I'm getting so much done. And then as it continued to drag on, it was like, oh my God, I miss everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, if nothing's happening, there's no inspiration.
Oh yeah.
It's depressing. I don't want to write all the time about, the world ending. That's sad.
Yeah, definitely. I guess the only inspiration was the pandemic. It's the only thing in the news, and the only place you could go was the shops, and that's not really the best place to get inspiration, really.
Write a poem about my favorite biscuits or cookies,
Oh yeah.
just yeah, I don't think people would be interested in that.
Hobnobs. So, where are we able to find all your poetry if we'd like to check it out?
So I have it for sale. The collections and the short novellas are for sale on Amazon.
Yeah.
They're either under Bridget O'Connell or B.A. O'Connell. Those are my two writing names. And then I also post pretty regularly on my Tumblr, which is hellish rebuke system at tumblr.com. And then those are the two main places you'd find it. And sometimes I put tweets out, and my handle is at once I ate a taco.
Ooh.
But
Only
it's
once.
only once.
Did you nearly die or something?
But yeah, those are the two main places, or the few main places you'll find it. Yeah.
And I take it, is it quite easy to publish poems on Amazon? Because that seems to be where everybody is putting their books these days.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty easy process. What's not easy, this is a warning to all you people who want to self-publish or put a book on Amazon, is it's not easy to promote your own book.
Oh.
It's not easy to get the ads and everything. So you gotta go in with a game plan for that if you're gonna do it.
Yeah, that's interesting because they might not like ads in their name or something. Is that why?
Well, it's just, you have to, if you're running the ad campaign, if you don't have somebody running the ad campaign for you, or and you have no experience writing ads or a budget for it. I mean, they'll let you put ads, but you have to pay for it and you have to write them and everything. So you got to be prepared for that kind of work.
You've got to be a bit of a marketing expert as well, which is not many people really.
Right. You just got to be prepared for that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show today. It's been great to have you here.
Yes, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.